And good afternoon and welcome everyone, or morning, depending on your time zone. Welcome everyone to the How Discrimination Gets Trapped in the Body webinar session. Today is part two of a three-part community of learning series entitled Facing Mental Health Challenges for Urban Indians. This interactive three-part series provides a special focus on mental health issues ranging from coping with grief and loss to chronic stress and alcohol substance misuse. We're honored to have you here today. We kindly ask that you place your name, organization, tribal affiliation, and title into the chat box below. In addition, we welcome any feedback you would like to provide about your webinar experience, and we'll have a survey link available to you for that feedback. Should be posted in our chat box. Next slide, please. Thank you. The National Council of Urban Indian Health is the national nonprofit organization devoted to the support and development of quality, accessible, and culturally competent public health services for American Indians and Alaska Natives living in urban areas. NCUI is the only national representative of the 41 Title V urban Indian organizations under the Indian Health Services Act for Indian healthcare improvement. We're organized to improve, let's see. I'm sorry, the text is blocked. Can you, to improve the health of over 7% of American Indian and Alaska Natives in urban areas, supported by quality, accessible healthcare. Thank you. Next slide. Just a quick overview of our agenda. Our time is, this is a 60-minute session. Again, my name is Mark Clark, and I'm the Technical Assistance Manager for NCUI. I will introduce our speakers shortly and get underway. Next slide, please. This webinar is being recorded. All mics have been muted unless otherwise directed. Please turn your camera on to allow for interaction. Again, this is a 1 hour long session, and questions can be typed into the chat box at any time. A Q&A session will be offered at the end of this session, and slides and recording will be made available on the NCUI Mental Health Webinar Series page at our homepage. An evaluation will follow at the end of this survey, and we welcome your feedback. Next slide, please. A little bit of housekeeping information on how to ask a question. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see the features to select chat on your Zoom controls. Once you've selected that, you can then type your question or comment into the chat box that will appear on the right-hand side of the screen. Next slide, please. Again, your feedback is really important to us. We're driven by the topics and the interests of our audience. We ask that you complete a brief survey at the end of this session. And again, a link will be posted in our chat to facilitate your access to that online survey. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce our presenters. Tommy Lee Woon is a descendant of Chinese sojourners and settlers and lives on Anishinaabe and Lakota ancestral territories. He is retired from dean-level multicultural affairs administration and education positions at several elite colleges and universities, including Naropa University, the first Buddhist university in the United States. His teaching experience includes offering classes at the Dartmouth and Stanford medical schools in emotional self-care to medical students. He is certified by the Stanford University Medical School's Center for Compassion, Altruism, Research, and Education, CCARE, and is also a trained somatic trauma therapist. Presenting along with Tommy, Cinnamon Spear Kills First is a word warrior and author, artist, writer, filmmaker, speaker, educator, bead maker, and advocate from the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Montana. She received both her BA and MALS from Dartmouth College and her MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she studied fiction. With a res education from home and 2 Ivy League degrees, she is a cross-cultural communicator who helps bridge the gap between Indian country and the rest of the world. Cinnamon is committed to facing hard truths to bring about change. She currently lives in Chinook Ancestral Territory, Portland, Oregon, where she owns and operates the Northside Advocacy LLC to support the work listed above. Amina Ghaffar is a Lumbee and Black activist from Pembroke, North Carolina. She studied physiology and biophysics with a concentration in integrative medicine at Georgetown University. Amina is an advocate and focuses most of her advocacy on missing and murdered Indigenous people and culturally competent and holistic methods to treat historical trauma in marginalized populations. She uses her website, goodmedicinewoman.com, to create content that addresses social justice, finding common humanity between marginalized populations, and misconceptions about Southeastern Indigenous culture. She's also the co-founder of the Coalition for Black and Indigenous Solidarity and a board member on the North Carolina MMIW Coalition, and working as a sexual assault and domestic violence advocate at the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs. Now, we'll have a knowledge check slide that'll show for just a few seconds to assess knowledge before our session begins, and we'll ask you to complete the knowledge check. Once that's completed, our presentation will begin. The polling question will be available for about 60 seconds, and we'll start thereafter. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the next voice you hear will be Tommy Lee Woon. Tommy?
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to start by thanking the National Council of Urban Indian Council, the National Council on Urban Indian Health. On behalf of my team, it's always an honor to be invited to speak to you. It's especially an honor for me as a non-Indigenous person when I'm invited to speak to you. Our title is an Indigenous-centric model for understanding and healing oppression. And so the title you saw earlier, How Discrimination Lives in the Body, we're looking today at both sides of discrimination. And even a broader view of discrimination as a subset of oppression. So oppression is two-sided. It's oppressing and it's being oppressed. And so we're going to look at an Indigenous model for understanding and overcoming oppressor disorders as well as oppressed trauma. Next slide, please. So first, I'd like to ask for permission to speak from all the Indigenous elders and the ancestors and spirits who are with us. And I want to thank you for permission to speak. I also want to acknowledge that I am an uninvited guest. I am trying to pay back rent for living on your land and for my ancestors living on your land. I live in the Anishinaabe, Lakota, Dakota, Nakota territories. I've been doing that for 15 years and other territories throughout my life. We're going to go through a framework for healing impression in the body. So as soon as I get through this page, I'm immediately going to do an overview in an experiential way. And then after I'm done, my colleague Amina Ghaffar is going to review a science poster of the research that we've done. And we'll end with Cinnamon Killsburst's beautiful poem that summarizes our work. Our focus is on healing oppression in the body. And I'm always talking about how Western science is full of Columbus discovered America research and knowledge. So feeling it heals it is an indigenous traditional wisdom. And so we're going to unpack a little bit of how this something that it's been known for thousands of years with indigenous people and with someone like Buddha, who figured out if you are aware of the body, then you heal it, and how science is validating that. We're applying this to oppression today. So next slide, please. So we're going to begin. And the first thing I want you to do is to ask yourself, what do you notice in your body right now? How are you feeling about me speaking to you? What else is happening? Are you upset? Are you calm? Are you thrilled? Are you frustrated? What is happening in your body? Now, this body talk presentation is called Somatic Literacy, Pedagogy, and Epistemology. So we're doing experiential learning using interoceptive awareness of sensations in the body to understand a new language for uncovering hidden and transparent realities in the body, such as unconscious bias, social and collective, and historical trauma. And please use this sensations list we distribute or can email to you, and we'll show you it in a second here, to enhance the way of learning. It's not interception, it's interoception of individual collective bodies. Now notice what you feel in your body as you listen, you do the introduction and run through that. Next slide, please. So these are some of the sensations that might describe how I immediately impacted you. First contact with you. My first contact. So when we look at the implicit and we uncover the felt sense, and what did you feel? And you might have these feelings and you might have all these, but cultivating and being aware of the body and all that helps us to understand alarms, and understanding alarms in the body helps us to understand healing. So immediately I want you to notice not what I said, but what you felt about what I said. Next slide, please. Now, that's the wrong one. Yes, thank you. Okay, now notice this one. We're going to apply first contact matters in the body. Compare your previous reaction with this and the previous slide. So compare this slide with what the previous slide. I'm presenting on body awareness and body talk, experiential learning using awareness of the body, of feelings in the body to uncover the hidden and transparent realities in the body that create oppression. And please use the feeling words we distributed or just showed. And now compare the difference, any subtle differences in how you reacted. At every moment, we are experiencing life, and we have an alarm system. We have an autonomic nervous system. And being aware how we feel helps us to heal. And when we're not aware, then we're unable to reproduce how we feel good. Next slide, please. Now, again, let's apply this practice of feeling it heals it. Now, let's look at this introduction. Tommy Lee Woon, master's degree, compassion cultivation, teaching credential from Stanford University, somatic experiencing practitioner, trauma healing institute. Amina Ghaffar, MS in physiology with minor in integrated medicine. Cinnamon Kilsberg, MA, Czech, that has MA, MFA, author and speaker. She is one of 50 people selected in 20,000 applicants to get her MFA. Notice what you feel in your body upon first contact with, because Indigenous people are relationship oriented. So how does you feel in your body immediately about your relationship with us as your teachers when you see this in the introduction? Next slide, please. Now, Hoi San. Hoi San, my family came in the 1800s as illegal aliens from Hoi San village. We were peasant people in China. We're looked down on. And my pronouns are he, his, him. Amina Sani Ghaffar, biracial, Black Lumbee, she, hers, her. Cinnamon Kilsberg, Northern Cheyenne. Notice what you feel in your body when you compare. First contact. Our first contact, how do you feel? I was in Alaska working with Alaska Natives 6 years ago. And I did an introduction. Tommy Lee Woon worked at 5 elite colleges, university, Stanford, Dartmouth, Macalester, Oberlin, and Brown University, 2 medical schools. And then I showed a picture of my kindergarten class. My kindergarten class in my Black Asian neighborhood, there were 3 white kids. And I showed pictures of my family as immigrants who came with nothing. And I said, what happened after the first slide and what happened after the second slide? An Alaskan Native man raised his hand. Well, as soon as you showed the first slide and described your professional credentials, I wanted to walk out of the room because I didn't feel, like I had anything in common with you. And then I saw the second slide and says, you my bro. And that to me is the real me. That isn't, like this credentials are used. I can play that game too, right? Okay, so what did you feel knowing us differently? First contacts, there's involuntary nervous system reactions that allow us to feel and heal relationships when we pay attention to our bodies. Next slide, please. So imagine at every event in school, we do Indigenous-centric introductions. So when Amina and Cinnamon and I went to Dartmouth College to work with medical school, we just walked in, did a ceremony, say smudging, and we invited the white students without instructing them. We just said, give us your name, your tribe, and your clan, and your traditional homeland. And we didn't explain it. We just asked them. And then we asked them afterwards, after we explained first contacts in the body, what did you feel in your body? And they said, well, I felt uncomfortable. I said, well, guess what? We come in and we say our name, our occupation, social groups, and we salute the flag. Now, what if we did every activity in Indigenous-centric way? Who's the in-group, who's the out-group, who's marginalized, who's empowered? That's in the body immediately. That affects learning. Next slide, please. So here's first contacts, right? First contacts, every first contact in the culture, if we're going to decolonize the United States, we would identify on the map indigenous territories. Everybody would introduce themselves the way I did and say land acknowledgement, where religion owns land. Everybody would acknowledge they are settlers, colonizers who owe back rent. Everyone would do some kind of ceremony to honor Indigenous people and ancestors. That's what decolonizing on first contacts would mean. Next slide, please. But instead, you we have done what? We have indigenous children going to boarding school, forced to do first contact by saluting the flag and speaking English only. And we have Japanese American children in concentration camps having to salute the flag. And then when we object, you know, we are harassed and told this is unpatriotic. First contact in the body matters. The body keeps the score. The involuntary nervous system reactions, the body's opinions count. So we have competing alarms in our body. Pledge of Allegiance creates alarms for us, doesn't create alarms for white people. They insist that we do it. Who has power over who controls the alarms and who privileges alarms? Pledge of Allegiance versus bowing in ceremony and smudging. Multisensory social resonance and dissonance. So whose resonance and dissonance matter? Dissonance for us, marginalization in our bodies is normalized. Next slide, please. So the human body is a Wi-Fi. Relationships matter. This is indigenous wisdom. Relationships matter. We're Wi-Fi. There's energy flow. Columbus discovered America. Now they're saying energy is real. Spirituality is real. We have neuroscience that shows this. We have quantum physics that shows this. We have all these things that are being uncovered that show that indigenous wisdom, healing it, feels it, matters. We are Wi-Fi's. Next slide, please. So imagine first contact. So let me tell you about our work. We've done a one-year program with white people, 30 volunteers, spending a year with us to free their bodies of unconscious and conscious bias, bigotry, and hate. And we had them meditate on, first, starting out, imagining themselves sitting in the center, outside, or in the circle of indigenous people, asking for permission to meditate, and then meditating breaths together for a change, taking breaths together with indigenous people alone, after having asked for permission, and asking them to notice what alarms went off. The people say, I'm not prejudiced. And I said, well, get in the middle of a group of indigenous people, Black people, Asian people, and sit there and tell me how your body feels. And they go, oh my God, my body's tight. You know, I feel like running. I'm anxious. Oh, you think that might be implicit bias, unconscious bias in your body? So we don't have to argue about implicit bias. We just ask them to notice their bodies when we imagine this. So we asked them to sit alone in 3 positions. We asked them to imagine themselves as babies, feeling and seeing no stranger, taking the first breaths. We asked them to imagine everyone else seeing them as no stranger. And we asked them to imagine going back to Europe and taking breaths together with their ancestors and their family members in Europe. And after each breath, saying, finally, land back for indigenous people. They spend a month on every meditation, and it leads up to that one. And they just did that, land back. In other words, we asked them to imagine that you go home, you go back to Europe, you reconnect to the ancestors, and you say land back after each breath together for a change. And then we asked them to imagine their descendants growing up, feeling and seeing no stranger as a result of all this. And what we learned is that white people have a hard time connecting to their ancestors because they're so ashamed of them. So they work really hard. So we've been doing this for a year and we have results, and Amina will be sharing the results in a minute here. Next slide, please. Oh, go back to the last slide. So this new, imagine first contact, I did this with Alaska Natives, and I said, imagine on first contact, the settlers came and said, we have permission to speak. We have permission to be on your land. will you help us to survive? And finally, will you take our children? Will you teach them to be indigenous in culture, identity, culture and identity and spirituality? We will give up our religion. We will give up our language. We will give up everything that makes us who we are. So we become you, because this is the way we take breaths together to feel and see no stranger. This is the way of decolonizing the body, to decenter whiteness, to become no stranger with indigenous people. And of course, the objection was, oh, that would never happen. I'm saying this is a therapeutic process. I'm just imagining it happen. I'm asking indigenous people, what would you feel? And the person who said earlier, oh, just imagining first contact creates a knot, he immediately said, after I described this and he did it, he says, my knot loosened. That's healing historical trauma. I said, were you there at first contact? Were you oppressed? No. Then why did you feel a knot when you imagined first contact? Because you inherited historical trauma in the body as an alarm. And when you imagined reverse assimilation, decolonization, first contact with no strangers, and taking breaths together and creating a world for your descendants 7 generations later, then you felt free and your body felt healed of trauma. Next slide, please. So the body is a Wi-Fi, and we practice in our meditation something called I-WISE. It actually should be capital W-I-S. I is indigenous. W is wisdom, informed, science, and education. We are reclaiming the tremendous scholarship and wisdom of indigenous people by framing our work as I-WISE, indigenous-centric, breaths together for change, to reset compasses, to reset the false alarms. Next slide, please. So we teach somatic literacy. So they figured out, Dr. Eugene Gendlin figured out DBA is doing business as Buddha and I-WISE. He figured out something very important. He figured out that healing feels it, feeling it heals it. And he proved it with scientific research that those people who felt things in their body could recover in psychotherapy, people who couldn't feel things in the body. For all of you workers out there working with people, the clients that you have and the people who are traumatized, if they can't feel their body, they're less likely to recover. People can feel their bodies and be in their bodies. And you as practitioners can be in your bodies. You will then create conditions that help heal, because your bodies will naturally search for balance and homeostasis and help reset the faulty alarms. And that's indigenous wisdom. Next slide. And so this is the, next slide, please. Oh, next slide, and you went backwards. I think we're going to skip this. I could give you the whole neurology, neuroscience of the polyvagal theory and this and that, but this is what science is doing. They're unpacking how trauma lives in the body. But as I said, what they're doing is Columbus discovered America because we didn't describe it this way. Buddha didn't describe the neuroscience, but he got the practice, and indigenous people got the practice. We've known these things. I think I'm going to, let's fast forward and transition and hand it over to Amina. And one more slide, keep going. These are the skills that required in the meditation. I won't go through that. Next one, please. So the one on the right, that the black, that's, our work is Breaths Together for a Change. And we believe in the healing oppression theory, HOT, refers to you don't heal trauma unless you end trauma, because upstream, bodies are getting thrown in, more bodies are thrown in the river than we can ever save going down the river. So all the work we do downriver, unless we get people to go upstream and stop the production of trauma and oppression, we will never end it. So our work is two-sided. And we're worked on the one side of stopping the trauma with white people to start a movement where they voluntarily stop the bias in their bodies and then work with other white people. And we're on our way to creating indigenous healing trauma program through meditation. And so Amina is going to report on what we're doing with the upstream work. And so because oppression is two-sided, it's upstream and downstream. And because there's been no significant upstream work in this country, we don't have white people learning how to stop their own bias, bigotry, and hate in a deep way, in a collective body way. And without that, all we do is go through mutations and metastasis and racism shifts from one form to another. So Amina is going to share the research we're doing with upstream work. Okay.
Next slide. Tommy, do you want to talk about the generational model?
Just a quick look, when I said upstream, downstream. So let's, practically speaking, upstream, doctrine of discovery 500 years ago when 3 popes morally authorized genocide, land theft, slavery, assimilation, and epistemicide, which is destroying ways of knowing. And so that's what we have at the boarding schools, epistemicide, but that flowed from the doctrine of discovery from the popes. So on the historical trauma side, you have genocide. White supremacy on the left is perpetration, then you have survivor trauma. Containment, imprisonment. Colonization, assimilation, suppression, erasure, mutation, multi-generational. The 2 sides of it, those are like more detailed practical things in terms of understanding the 2 sides of oppression. And when you look at how they live in the body, they're inherited and passed on. Okay.
Amina, just thanks for our pause. This is Cinnamon. I just wanted to pop in and just articulate a little bit more finely for what this looks like for Indigenous people, particularly those on the reservation or those coming from the reservation. The doctrine of discovery created this idea of white supremacy, which led to the reservation system, the creation of that, which is what we have listed here as containment. And then colonization, where our children were stolen and sent to boarding schools for the purpose of assimilation. So every act of perpetration by white people then created historical trauma, an associated historical trauma for Indigenous people in this country. The suppression of culture we see in our own people and our elders, a refusal to teach language, Indigenous language. At least that was true with my grandmother, who believed it was more important for me not to learn Cheyenne so that I could speak English properly, which is a direct reflection of the trauma that she endured in her lifetime and her wanting to protect me from the same, which on the historical trauma side of this model is the erasure, the cultural erasure. So that continues to mutate through generations. I just wanted to take a pause there to give a little bit more like real life context to what these single words mean on the model. Go ahead.
Thank you, Cinnamon. I think it's really important to understand the historical context between all of these things. And also, just in general, this model was designed to show and present the duality of bias. So like on both sides, and oftentimes in our education system, we're often getting one side of the story. Next slide, please. So here's our science poster, and this is from our 4-month assessment. So what we do is we survey our participants once a month on each meditation, their responses and what their experience was. And then we do a 4-month assessment, an 8-month assessment, and then we do a 12-month assessment. And is that a little bit better?
Your volume could be a little higher if at all possible.
How about now?
That's better.
Okay. And so this is our 4-month assessment, and our program is titled Breaths Together for a Change, Creating a World of Feeling and Seeing No Stranger. And we work closely with Valerie Carr, who wrote a book called Feeling and Seeing No Stranger, a Manifesto of Revolutionary Love. And we are looking at assessing Indigenous-centric wisdom traditions to reduce racial bias, spectrum disorder, and white allies. And I'll go over to the abstract. So we introduce and report on an innovative pilot meditation program designed to test an Indigenous-centric approach for permanently eliminating racial bias. Our subjects include 30 white volunteers who were recruited for a year-long self-paced meditation program. So our program is created through custom meditations, which are released monthly, and they're designed to reduce racial bias with priority on reducing bias towards Indigenous people. These are presented with an integrative, holistic, ecological program that highlights Indigenous people's wisdom and spiritual traditions, including the concepts that feeling it heals it, as Tommy was saying earlier. So storytelling matters, and the suffering of one affects everyone, and spirituality and ceremonies are valuable for personal and collective growth. These elements were combined with somatically informed Eastern meditation practices. Mid-month optional group meditation and end-of-the-month debriefing sessions provided additional learning opportunities. And so an overview of our outcome measures are our monthly surveys, 1-minute participant recorded videos, 6-word story e-portfolios, and all of these were collected to measure our insights and our progress. And I won't read the results section because I'll kind of get into that more in other parts of the poster, but I will go over our motivations. And so our intention was to create a meditation program that unleashes activism, empowerment, and decolonization of self, relationships, and systems to stop bias. Responding to 1, the limited impact of anti-racial bias, reduction interventions, and 2, limited pro-social effects of meditation reported in published research. Absence of meditation explicitly designed to eliminate racial bias, bigotry, and hate in general, and reduction of historical bias against Indigenous people in the Americas in particular. Honoring Indigenous wisdom traditions such as Feeling It Heals It to recenter and decolonize Eurocentric epistemicide of them in Western science. And what epistemicide is the discredit of Indigenous-centric knowledge by Western science, and so that's what we're alluding to in that case. We're also testing a sustained, holistic, integrated, synergistic, metasomatic, and ecological template for creating lasting reduction in racial bias and enhancement of pro-sociality. And so we intentionally were biased in our recruitment of our subjects. We picked all white volunteers, which is something that's unheard of in Western research standards. But we wanted to do that because we wanted to make sure that we chose people who were willing to commit to doing this work and were already highly optimized in anti-racism. And so we screened for values and interest in a fresh approach for fighting racism. And so each of the people that we recruited also had a relationship with one of 6 team members, including myself, Tommy, Cinnamon, and our 3 white therapist assistants. And then we also wanted to choose people that we wanted to spend a year with, especially addressing a very difficult subject. And so we started with 30 volunteers at first, and we lost around 6 people total so far because of time constraints, or they just didn't really fit the profile of the people that we were looking for. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the intervention and design and process, it's a self-paced program, and we're very versatile. And we have distinct monthly digital meditations and social emotional workouts. And so Tommy alluded to our meditation design and processing model earlier. And so I'm just going to run through these a little bit, but I really wanted to draw attention also to our logo. So the two fish in the middle that you can probably see better in the corner of the page. When we're talking about blending wisdom traditions with science, our logo embodies that, and that Tommy's from East Asian tradition. And I also made the color scheme, the colors of the medicine wheel and the 4 directions. And so we have this nice blend of us blending our wisdom together to create this program for the world. And so we invite our participants to do their somatic inquiry, audit. Actually, Tommy, I think I would feel more comfortable if you took this part because you're the meditation guru. And I think you'll be able to explain these terms a little bit better than I can.
And
Okay.
just for an awareness for my team, we have about a little over 15 minutes left, and we want to save space for Q&A.
Okay.
Okay.
When we teach people to meditate, we teach them to practice being aware of their body in these ways, to practice noticing when they feel centered, when they feel that they're celebrating something. And because both of those helps to feel and heal, every one of those aspects. Somatic inquiry is simply, what do you notice in your body? But, you know, what sensations, what warmth, what temperature, when you breathe in, breathe out, you notice the air coming through your nostrils. Is it cooler or warmer? All these little details of understanding how the body works reveals how your nervous system works. So then you audit it. You audit your body when you imagine yourself surrounded by people of color and you go, oh, the alarms went off. I feel tight in my chest or restless in my legs. Then you start to learn how that bias lives in your body and you capture and hold it. So we don't teach people to soothe themselves with our meditation. We teach them to face the alarms so that they can reckon with the alarms, feel, soak, detect the alarms, profile, uncover, reckon. You have to be able to face the alarm to reset them. So they learn about how not to override, how not to bypass, how not to deny, because you can do that all with your head, but your body has all these reactions. So when you learn how to take away all those natural defenses that keep you from feeling it to heal it, then you don't heal it. You don't heal the perpetrator disorders or trauma. So then once you are able to feel it and heal it, you will feel lots of feelings. So we invite them to feel really bad about what they did. And then we invite them to celebrate, because when they feel bad, they reconnected their heart. And when they feel bad and you're able to feel it and access it, they are reconnecting with their heart and they're discovering how much they care. The people who've dissociated and detached themselves can't feel it, can't care, can't act. Our program is increasing the motivation of people who are already motivated, because we're helping them to understand how to access and feel the pain, hold the pain, both individually and collectively, so they can finally feel all the things we feel every day because of the perpetrator kinds of things that happens. So resetting and integrating and sustaining is really important, because you have to be able to sustain the change. 8 months of weeks of meditation changes the gray area and the prefrontal cortex, the empathy brain, part of the brain. So you grow that. It takes 8 months for it to hold. And so how long do you think racism, bias, bigotry, hate baked in the body will take because they have to unlearn and face alarms and release? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. So that's why we call it a social emotional workout. And they do it with support. So this is when we use the word meditation, this is not your grandmother's meditation. This is inverting everything that's traditional. So we are challenging what Buddha taught, because I think it was incomplete.
Okay, so for time, I'm going to skip over the schematic part of our program design and skip to the self-reported areas of change. And so comparisons of the pre-programmed survey with a cumulative change survey using a Likert scale after 4 months produced these self-reports of moderate to high changes. And so with the scale, we went from low changes to high changes. And so our most significant changes at the 4-month mark were understanding mutations of racial bias at 54%, awareness of ecological nature of bias at 52%, awareness of the need for the sustained efforts to overcome racial bias at 56%, and actually just looking at the 8th month assessment, that went up 20% with our last round of surveys, which was astounding. Participants report high change in motivation to end racial bias at 64%. Participants report a high change in awareness of the need to address racial bias in the body, 72%, and high motivation to overcome personal bias at 92%. And also for our moderate change, we did find that using somatic literacy to detect social dissonance was at 56%, cultivating social resonance, 72%, and application to detect subtle and sharper alarms in the body, 64%, committing to forming affinity groups and overcoming racial bias, 52%, which jumped up to 80 in our last survey. Most participants rated that they had a moderate ability to reckon with implicit personal bias at 68%, and most participants rated a high level of accountability for explicit personal bias at 52%. And so our 5 dependent variables, sorry if you can hear my niece in the background.
Yes, we can. She's cute.
She's really cute. But so we're measuring awareness, motivation, accountability, reckoning, and then strategic capacity. And so at this point in our program, we are focusing a lot more on strategic capacity for the last 4 months. And so we're inviting our allies to continue to practice meditations and collaborate in support groups to develop customized anti-bias reduction plans. And then also in terms of leadership development, we noticed that 78% of participants declared interest in teaching Breast Together for a Change prior to beginning the year-long program, which was really impressive, which means we've targeted this group that does want to do upstream work, which means they want to go and work with other white people to get rid of their racial bias, which takes the pressure off of people of color to do that work. And deeper work will be continuing to build the capacity to reckon and reset faulty alarms with their reflexive bypassing and autonomic mutations to overcome perpetrator racial bias spectrum disorders in the body that make complicated and permanent elimination of racial bias. And as Tommy was saying earlier, we noticed that healing ancestors is the key to healing self, and further exploration of challenges that our subjects faced when meditating about European white ancestors. And we have also seen some breakthroughs with some of our participants in regards to connecting to those ancestors. And so we have 1 minute to 50, so we have some time for Q&A.
Yeah, so I was going to offer to Justine. I know there's a poem which I'd like to contribute to this, but let's hold it for the last 3 minutes in case questions died down. I'd like to prioritize giving the audience some interactive dialogue now. If there's no time for the poem, that's fine. You guys can find it on YouTube and watch it afterwards. But let's do the knowledge check and then move to the Q&A. Well, the knowledge check is being prepared. I would just like to orate a question that we have in the chat. Maybe Tommy can answer. My question is, what are your suggestions for people of color who experience social dissonance and daily alarms in corporate culture and work environments, which is prevalent, we know. What can this person do?
I would say that you should honor everything you already do and not have doubts about your own protective responses. In other words, continue to be proud of yourself, continue to believe in yourself, continue to believe that whatever adaptations you're making, whether you're overriding things or you're speaking out, that it's all healthy because your alarms are working. What people of color, BIPOC people need to do is learn to rest in between all that survival work. So taking a breath and remembering that your ancestors survived, remembering the labor of love, remembering that there are actually more of us than there are them, and that you're not alone. And taking that breath and pausing and developing breath consciousness. So as my wife would say, this is a marathon. It's a marathon that's going to go through hundreds of years. We're trying to start a movement to change history. It's not going to happen overnight, but in the meantime, we have to figure out how to survive in an environment, in the ecosystem that has been established to be, to hold us down. So in that marathon, notice where there's relief, notice who's standing by you, notice who's offering water. We get so exhausted and overwhelmed, we often fail to see that there are resources somewhere. And if nowhere else, it's inside you in terms of taking breaths and noticing that you're alive and when you're safe, so that the rest can allow you to continue to fight. It's not going to be easy. And I would suggest organizing support groups, constantly having support groups. And if your family isn't a good support group, then you create your own family. Or get a pet.
Another question. Another question in the chat says, my team is developing a cultural awareness presentation. What do you recommend for bringing awareness to staff and working with Native patients? There's often reported historical mistrust and times when our patients do not return due to multiple reasons. However, miscommunication linked to lack of cultural knowledge is an issue we seek to address.
No, there's a lot of really good practices out there for healing circles and listening, and that are really important and valuable. It's just that it's hard to sustain. And so where you don't have, healing circles, where you don't have sweat lodges, where you don't have ceremonies and dances, and where you can't do it enough, it's because the alarms that have been baked into the body through historical trauma keep firing. And so this is why we're trying to introduce an awareness of the body and of the alarms so that they can be integrated into those practices. So again, as what I said earlier about survival, you already have many resources and capacities, but you're also facing overwhelming historical trauma that's present every day with survival every day. And so it's about doing those activities that allow you to get rest so that you can continue for another day. It is not going to be easy. At some point, we are creating a program that helps Indigenous people to understand more technically the alarms and how to manage them so that you can learn to suspend the alarms more frequently in a sustained way and to offer more a different pathway for full recovery rather than just coping. Because right now everyone's in a coping place, and so we don't have any new programs to give you other than to offer the perspective that I just did, and to say that we are working as quickly as we can to begin to promote somatic literacy, which is a more technical breakdown of healing it, feels it. It's not that you haven't done it or don't know it, but you can do it more intentionally and more efficiently if we unpack this for you. Amina?
Yeah, also with working with Native patients, I think, as Tommy was saying earlier in the presentation, like we are relational. So I think it's also a matter of, do people go out in the communities and spend time with those communities that they're working with? Like, do you go to powwows? Do you go to cultural events? Do you go to the, depending on what area you're in, there's like plenty of activities that the Native community puts on there. And so like building up, that's how you build trust is, you know, showing your face somewhere, or you know, taking the time to get to know the people that you're going to be working with in clinic. And I think that builds that bridge.
I agree. I'd also like to add, encouraging staff to learn the language of the community members they're serving, even if like you just learn one word, how to say thank you in a different language or in the language of the people there, that can make a difference. It's a small first step, but as Amina said, prioritizing relationship building is important to get patients to return and prioritize their own healthcare. There is one quick question, Tommy, and then maybe we can close with taking a breath together with the poem. The quick question just asked if caffeine affects our ability to feel it and heal it, or other substances. I'd extend that question to.
You know, everything that suspends feeling it, heals it, helps us to get through the day. Drugs, people take drugs so they won't have to feel it because it's so overwhelming, because when they feel it, they don't know how to heal it. You have to feel it, and you have to feel all the rage and all that, and there's no room for that unless you're going to a sweat lodge where you can do that, or someplace. I guess using coffee is a Band-Aid. Like all these things are Band-Aids. And so Band-Aids are useful, but they don't give you the cure. It gets you through the day.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think at this point, I just wanted to share, I'm the artistic kind of communication lead for the team. And I'm an artist by training, a writer by training. So it's my special privilege to be able to take this very scientific base body work, healing historical trauma, and trying to distribute it or speak about it in ways that, in artistic ways that I think are easily digestible for any audience. So with that, we'll close this presentation with this video, which invites you to take breaths together with us right now as we close in reflection on this work. Thank you all.
Let us begin by calling forth the ancestors. Now that the warriors, chiefs, and matriarchs of times past are here at last, let us pause and acknowledge their presence. Wopilatanka. We are one. We are one. We are one. Maitakyo Ayasi. We are all related. Related. We are all related. Not just me and you, brothers and sisters, but all of us, the rocks and the rivers, everything that flies above, everything that crawls below, related, in relation, my relative. Do you ever just pause? Stop scrolling, stop scrolling, stop scrolling. Whatever you're searching for, it's not out there in the nothingness. There's beauty and expansion, creativity and wonderment inside ourselves, inside of you. Put your phone down. Sit with your breath and go in, go deep. There's an entire universe in there. Can't you feel it resting in your stomach? Can't you feel it bursting from your chest? That heart is your power source. That beat is your own natural rhythm. You are perfectly on time. You are perfectly in time with the universe. Feel that power, that presence, that's you. Clear your mind. Breathe your spirit into your body. Follow your heart. It will lead you. And now, if you will allow, I'm asking to lead you. If you are comfortable, please close your eyes. Yes, really, right now, close your eyes. Listen to the sound of my voice, and as you do, hear the voices of all those who have come before me. And breathe. Breathe in the air of revolutionary love. Breathe out the stress and suffering. Breathe in, imagining a source of compassion. Breathe out the grief and violence. Breathe in healing light. Breathe out trapped emotions. Breathe in pride, reckoning, and survival. Breathe out all the pain and shame. Breathe in forgiveness. Breathe out inadequacy. Breathe in your fight for lives and life. Breathe out your fear and pain. Breathe in our healthy future. Breathe out our wounded past. Imagine your ancestors surrounding you now. Imagine your own compassion surrounds you. Now let us take a breath together for a change. Breathe in, breathe out. And as we continue breathing from where we are, sense our breaths together for a change. Let us feel and see no stranger, now or ever. Repeat after me in your own mind. May I find peace. May I know peace. May I create peace. If you haven't yet, please open your eyes. May we remember we are good. May we know we are strong. May we feel we are loved. We are love. I am love. I am love. Peace.
Thank you to Tommy Wu, Cinnamon Kills First, and Amina Gafar, and all the participants for joining us today in this impactful session. We appreciate your time and attention today. Have a happy Wednesday and be well.
Nia ish, Pilamayaye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, National Council of Urban Indian Health, for inviting us again.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists and all of our participants for an engaging session. Goodbye all. Have a safe day.